Good morning, everyone. I will now call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 57 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today in connection with its study of Report 1, Accessible Transportation for Persons with Disabilities, of the Auditor General of Canada's 2023 Report 1 to 4.
From the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General, Milan Duvenjak, Principal, Susie Fortier, Director. From the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, Nada Saman, President and Chief Executive Officer. And I spotted that your name card has a small, I'm terribly sorry about that, and I do apologize for that error. Also from the authority, Louise Alberelli, General Manager, Operational Programs, and Rhonda Boyd, General Manager, Communications. From the Canadian Transportation Agency, France Peugeot, Chair and Chief Executive Officer, Tom Aumann, Director General, Analyst and Outreach Branch. And from Via Rail Canada, joining us by video conference, Marie-Claude Cardin, Chief Financial Officer, and Catherine Langlois, Senior Advisor, Universal Accessibility, both joining us by video conference. Before I turn to our witnesses, I understand that, yes, Mr. Genuis, you have a motion before us.
Yes.
Do you want the clerk to read it for you, or do you want to speak to it? How would you like to proceed on this?
I'll read it into the record.
That's
fine. Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is important that as a committee we're able to take up urgent issues of the day, and as such, I'm moving a motion that I did provide notice of that is aimed at getting to the bottom of dishonest conduct and attempted foreign interference of the Trudeau Foundation. So the motion is as follows: that given that the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation received a $125 million taxpayer-funded payout in 2002 when the foundation was created by a former Liberal government, 2, the president and CEO and a majority of the board of directors of the foundation resigned recently, 3, the foundation was reported to be incapable of repaying a large donation received from a wealthy individual connected to the CCP regime in Beijing because the donor's true identity is not known, 4, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service had uncovered a plot by the CCP regime in Beijing to donate to the foundation, and 5, it has been reported by the media that some foundation directors had considered calling in the Auditor General. The committee undertake a study concerning the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation and its governance and funding, as well as the management of its taxpayer-funded endowment, provided that the committee hear testimony from A, Morris Rosenberg, former president and CEO of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, B, Pascal Fournier, former president and CEO of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, C, the Auditor General of Canada, D, the Minister of National Revenue, E, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, F, Bob Hamilton, the Commissioner and Chief Executive Officer of the Canada Revenue Agency, G, Sharmila Kher, Director General of the Canada Revenue Agency's Charities Directorate, and H, other witnesses as deemed necessary by the committee. So, Mr. Chair, as you know, Conservatives have been working hard to get to the bottom of the serious problem of CCP interference in Canadian democracy. It is becoming clear that there was, from the beginning, a concerted effort by the Xi Jinping regime to co-opt and shape the direction of this Liberal government, and that those efforts targeted Justin Trudeau even before he took office. It could be in certain cases that there are influence efforts which are rebuffed by the intended target. But in this case, it is becoming clear that the Prime Minister and those around him were aware of this attempted interference and accepted it because they benefited from it. They benefited from it in the form of dollars for a family foundation and in the form of electoral support. This is an urgent issue because Canadians and because their representatives on this side of the House are deeply concerned about threats to Canadian sovereignty, about the reality that hostile foreign actors with interests contrary to Canada are trying to capture our leaders and subvert our institutions. In response to these pressing concerns about foreign state-backed interference and threats to our national security and our sovereignty, Liberals have been desperate to bury the story. They and their proxies have attacked journalists, attacked CSIS, attacked the opposition, stonewalled stonewalled studies through extended filibusters at various committees, and refused to answer basic questions during committee appearances. Conservatives continue to push, as we have from the beginning, for a full public inquiry into foreign interference and an inquiry led by someone who is truly independent of the government and of the organizations implicated in this scandal. So my motion today is about the role of the Trudeau Foundation in attempts by the CCP to interfere in Canadian democracy. The role of the Trudeau Foundation in this scandal is particularly important. As soon as a Prime Minister also named Trudeau took office, foreign donations to the foundation skyrocketed. It does not take a Trudeau Foundation scholar to figure out that there was some relationship, at least in the minds of these foreign donors, between the foundation and the Prime Minister, such that they had a reason to donate to the foundation after 2015 that they did not have before 2015. Again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. In fact, Le Devoir has reported recently that the Trudeau Foundation began actively soliciting these foreign donations. Again, they can't have been ignorant about the implications of having a Trudeau Prime Minister and soliciting money from foreign donors for this family foundation, who also wanted to have an influence over the direction of the Canadian government. This was quite obvious and was, in fact, the subject of repeated questions by our party in question period in the early days after 2015. These questions were blown off by Liberals at the time, who continued to praise and defend the Trudeau Foundation. But since that time, the leadership of the Trudeau Foundation has faced further scrutiny, promised to return a donation to a CCP insider, claimed that they had returned the donation, failed to return the donation, and then resigned en masse. Through these events, there has been a great deal of bluster from senior Liberals who want to blame the media and blame Conservatives for the problems of the Trudeau Foundation and the Trudeau government. In response to some of this misinformation, it's important to put the facts on the record about the Trudeau Foundation. So the Trudeau Foundation is not a normal charity. It is defined in law as a government institution. The Access to Information Act and the Privacy Act define the Trudeau Foundation as a government institution. In fact, the Trudeau Foundation's privacy policy says as much on its website. The Federal Accountability Act also specifically named the Trudeau Foundation and empower the Auditor General to follow the money that it spends. Importantly, though, the Trudeau Foundation was not directly set up by government. It was created as a family foundation with a preferred position in governance given to members of the Trudeau family, including the current Prime Minister. It was a family foundation that was subsequently turned into a government institution through the injection of $125 million of taxpayers' money. Regardless of the merits of its work, this is an extremely odd governance structure for any organization. You have a family foundation that is a registered charity, but that also has many of the characteristics of a crown corporation, insofar as it has been heavily subsidized and insofar as it is defined as a government institution in various statutes. In effect, it has the freedom of a private charitable organization while benefiting from the Prime Minister's name and the taxpayers' money, even while members of his family continue to shape its future. Now, Liberals have claimed that this Frankenstein had bipartisan support, but that does not appear to be the case based on my review of Hansard. John Williams, and a former chair of this committee actually, said in the House on May 19, 2022, when the appropriations for the Trudeau Foundation were being discussed, quote, "Mr. Speaker, could the President of the Treasury Board confirm that the bill is in its usual form for an appropriations bill and that the $125 million donation to the Pierre Trudeau Foundation and opposed by the opposition is actually in order," end of quote. So on the governance structure specifically, the governance of the Trudeau Foundation is invested in the Foundation's membership, which in turn selects the board of directors. These are clear facts, and you can find them on page 53 of the Foundation's latest annual report. There are 30 members of the Foundation. 6 out of 30 seats are set aside for members appointed by the Minister of Industry, and 3 are reserved for, quote, liquidators of the succession of the late Right Honourable Pierre Elliott Trudeau, effectively members of the Trudeau family or family appointees. So 9 of 30 spots of those who control this organization are selected by either the Trudeau government or the Trudeau family. Both Sacha Trudeau and Justin Trudeau are members of the Foundation. The Prime Minister identifies as a, quote, inactive member, although he continues to be a member of the Foundation with apparently the associated powers and privileges. This is an even more curious relationship, that a sitting Prime Minister retains membership in a foundation along with his brother and along with up to 6 members that his government directly appoints, and along with David Johnston, who is apparently responsible for investigating this whole mess. So claiming non-involvement is a bit odd, given that he maintains membership in the Foundation. The members of the Trudeau Foundation select the Trudeau Foundation's board of directors, up to 18 directors, with 2 seats reserved for representatives appointed by the Minister of Industry and 2 seats set aside for members or reps of the Trudeau family. At the time of the last annual report being published, Sarah Coyne, the Prime Minister's half-sister, was one of the family representatives on the board. So the Trudeau Foundation and the Prime Minister the Trudeau Foundation had the Prime Minister as one of 30 members, though he identifies as inactive, another sibling as an ostensibly active member, and another sibling as a member of the Board of Directors. About 1/3 of the membership spots and 1/3 of the director spots are reserved for appointees of the Trudeau government or the Trudeau family. And whatever the Prime Minister's ongoing involvement in the Trudeau Foundation is or isn't, the CCP were not incorrect in their calculation that this family foundation is close to his heart. Alan Rock said as much when he announced the Liberal government's massive injections of funds into the Trudeau Foundation in 2002. He said, quote, "Two people deserve particular credit. Without Sacha and Justin Trudeau's determination, idealism, and yes, their father's famous stubbornness, today's announcement would simply not have been possible." Liberals like Alan Rock know that the Trudeau Foundation is close to the Prime Minister's heart and subject to his potential influence. That reality is evident from even a cursory review of the Trudeau Foundation's governing documents. So when today Liberals like Alan Rock whine about how we shouldn't criticize a charity, they are being highly misleading and they know it. Government institutions like the Trudeau Foundation should be held accountable by parliamentary committees. The Trudeau Foundation was supported by Alan Rock and others to be able to use taxpayers' money, and they were created to simultaneously be subject to the ongoing influence of the Liberal establishment and the Trudeau family. When the good book says to build your foundation upon a rock, it wasn't referring to Alan Rock. Unfortunately, the governance of this foundation is not on anything solid, but on the shifting sands of politics and of the preferences of the Trudeau family. Now, the Trudeau family has rightly been subject to significant criticism over the fact that they cashed checks from foreign entities that were clearly trying to use those donations to curry favor with the government of Canada. It appears now that they solicited these donations from foreign sources. Further, it is now very clear that the Trudeau Foundation lied to Canadians about its decision to return a donation. On March 1st, the Trudeau Foundation issued a statement which includes the following. The Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation has learned in recent days through the media that there was a potential connection between the Chinese government and the 2016 pledge of $200,000 to be received by the foundation. In light of these recent allegations, the foundation has refunded to the donor all amounts received with respect to the donation pledge. So on March 1st, the claim was made past tense that the foundation has refunded to the donor all amounts received with respect to the donation pledge. It does not say they were thinking about or planning to or intending to. They said the foundation has refunded to the donor. That was a lie. The statement did not say that they were intending to. They said that they had. And they didn't. And this failure contributed to the governance crisis that we have since seen at the Trudeau Foundation. This government and this Trudeau family institution were subject to a sustained campaign of foreign interference. They accepted the money and then lied about when they were returning it. Now, the Trudeau Foundation has now asked the Auditor General to investigate, and we need a thorough investigation by the House of Commons Audit Committee of where the money went and what governance problems at this government institution led us to that point. That's why we have put forward this motion, and it is squarely within this committee's mandate as the committee responsible for the audit function of Parliament to study this issue, to understand what auditing processes were involved, could be involved, to look at the appropriateness of a CRA audit as well as a review by the Auditor General, things that, of course, we support, along with a fully independent public inquiry into the whole mess. This government has commissioned 2 different people to investigate the foreign interference issue, Morris Rosenberg and David Johnson, both from the Trudeau Foundation. Liberals should not investigate Liberals, and Trudeau Foundation members and directors should not be investigating the Trudeau Foundation. Honestly, Mr. Chair, sometimes this government behaves as if this country only had a dozen families in it. They keep recycling the same people who are part of the same well-connected Laurentian insider circles from the same families related to themselves who have served them in the past. Trudeau Foundation members investigating foreign interference, Dominic LeBlanc's sister as ethics commissioner, I could go on. In this massive country of almost 40 million people with immigrants from all corners of the world, they nonetheless keep recycling the same insiders from the same insider families. This Liberal government is a government for their friends, for the connected corporate insiders who work for McKinsey and volunteer at the Trudeau Foundation. If you were born into or if you married into one of the 30 or 40 families that hold the cards, then no problem. You get the government contracts, the foreign donations, the ethical cover, whatever it is you're looking for. But I say this is a big country, and let's act like it. Let's have proper parliamentary oversight. Let's call in the truly independent actors to get to the bottom of this ethical mess, get to the bottom of this corruption that is undermining trust in our institutions. Conservatives would never dream of even trying a thing like this. Can you imagine if Conservatives started a Stephen Harper Foundation, put all of Stephen Harper's heirs into leadership positions in the organization, and then pumped $125 million of taxpayers into that foundation? Can you imagine the extent to which Liberals would lose their mind over such an arrangement? But Conservatives would never do such a thing because we will stand with the common people. Liberals like Alan Rock, Jerry Butts, and Justin Trudeau do not want to see powerful people and institutions held accountable. It's clear from their comments. But Conservatives will continue to speak truth to power on behalf of the common people, and we hope that other opposition parties will support us in passing this motion and helping us get to the bottom of this mess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. Are there any other comments on Mr. Genuis's motion, which is before this committee? Mr. Macaulay?
Thanks.
Let me just say to our witnesses, it is not my intention to keep you here any longer than absolutely necessary if this goes on, but I'm just not sure how this is going to unroll, so I appreciate your patience, and I thank you in advance. So, and I'm going to have to ask you to sit through this for a little bit, but if way or the other, I'll let you know. Mr. Macaulay, you have the floor.
Go. Yeah, sorry, just want to offer up a couple of small items for amendments to the original motion. And I'll provide my written notes to you to make it easier. Just on number 5, replacing the first part of the sentence instead of "it has been reported by the media," replace that with "the Foundation wrote to the Auditor General to investigate donations from a wealthy individual connected to the CCP regime," and then just change H to read, instead of "other witnesses that deemed necessary," change that to Edward Johnson, Bruce McNiven, and Peter Salas from the Board of Directors of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and then I, other witnesses deemed necessary by the committee.
Thank you. You'll send those to the clerk. We'll consider those in a few minutes. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank my colleague for presenting this motion. I think it's an important motion, and I think that it's in line and spirit with what many Canadians would expect from this committee. And so I do think that it's an important piece of a very important motion that I think members of this committee should take seriously. The parts I don't necessarily agree with within the motion are related to some of just the intent of the motion. So it's my understanding that the Auditor General's office is in receipt of a request from the Trudeau Foundation itself to audit them. So they themselves agree with the member in this case that they should be audited. So I agree with that point from both perspectives. It's I think, and our goal at this committee to find a way to actually best account for what's happened here, and I think the person that's best able to do that is the Auditor General. It was made remarks by the member that the most important piece to this would be an independent investigation, and that an independent investigation be conducted by independent offices. And I agree, the Auditor General is an independent office, an independent officer of this place, and could and should investigate this as a matter of perception for Canadians, because of course the conflict is there. I don't think, however, that members of this committee should undertake a study that would involve many of these members when the Auditor General has the tools and capacity to do that work. We have many things to do in this committee, and I think that this piece of this motion is best served by this committee if we can find a way to come to a consensus, would be my hope, of all parliamentarians here to actually agree that we have the Auditor General do this investigation. Many of the aspects contained within the motion, however, I don't feel necessary if we're trying to find a way to have the independent piece to this accountable. And so I would suggest that we find a way to create either an amendment or a process that would clarify, 1, the willingness of this committee to see the Auditor General conduct an investigation, 2, do it in a way that's transparent and independent, and then 3, come back to that report, because we always study reports of the Auditor General. And so I would await the report from the Auditor General so that we can actually conduct that investigation properly into the goals of this committee. So I'd seek advice from my committee colleagues as to what they think about that process, if they're amendable, to see that this amendment be more consistent with the goals of this committee, which is to ensure that the work of the Auditor General, in this case, the work of auditing the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, be conducted. However, I don't think that it requires members of this committee to summon witnesses before that audit is complete.
Appreciate that. I'm just going to suspend for a few seconds. I just want to consult with the clerk on a few things, so just 1 second. And I see several hands. Is there an agreement on this side? I saw. Well, yeah, no, but in terms of speaking, where I don't. Okay, just 1 sec, please. With the motion before us, there is a amendment to the motion, as well as it appears some discussion coming from Mr. Desjardins as well. I'm going to turn to Mr. Fragascatos, and then I'll come back to the witnesses very quickly. Mr. Fragascatos, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to members. We support what Mr. Desjardins has said. We want this committee to stay focused on its important work. The matters that have been raised are certainly important, but the course of action that he suggests, I think, provides an avenue that definitely is in keeping with our obligations as parliamentarians. If I understand procedure correctly, Mr. Chair, I think we need a new motion to bring to life what Mr. Desjardins has said, and to get there, I suggest that we adjourn debate on Mr. Janis's motion now and vote to that effect.
So I'm open to that, Mr. Fragascatos. Could I hear some comments from Mr. Janis on that? Oh, just one second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yes, Ms. Franks, and then I'll clarify in the thinking.
I move
but-
to adjourn debate on Mr. Genis's motion.
Sorry, he didn't have the floor when he moved it.
Well, that's it, yeah. So we're on the amendment to Mr. Genuis, we're on Mr. McCauley's amendment to Mr. Genuis's motion. And my understanding is this would require, if we want to short circuit the way you're suggesting, which is why I want to seek, if there's agreement on this side, it will require unanimous consent.
That's my
Sorry,
understanding.
just a point of order, Chair. Chair, yeah, just a point of order. A member who has the floor can move a motion to adjourn debate.
Right.
However, Mr. Fragaskatos finished. You said you were going to go to me, and then you consulted with the clerk.
All
so
right. I'm going to hear from Mr. Genuis first.
But when Mr. Fragaskatos has the floor, he's right. He's welcome to move a adjournment of debate motion at that point. So let me make my comments, and then
let me make his comment, then I'll come right back to you.
and then you'll have the floor. So I just want to say, I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the Auditor General being asked to look at the issue.
Or,
and
Mr.
we're
Chair,
talking
when a
about
member moves a
this
dilatory motion, there shouldn't be
committee.
any time for debate.
We're not debating a dilatory motion. He didn't have the floor, Mr. Sadhu, and thanks for paying attention.
Mr. Fragaskatos, I did
I'll
come
have
back
the
to you out of
floor.
courtesy, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Genuis as a courtesy, then I'm going to come right back to you, and you can move it very quickly. All right, so go ahead, Mr. Genuis.
So we're talking about two different things. We're talking about this committee doing a study, and we're talking about asking the Auditor General to do an audit of the Trudeau Foundation. Now, we are in favor of both of those things happening. We think the role the Auditor General will pursue is very important, but unfortunately, the Auditor General, in our view, her office hasn't been sufficiently resourced, and there are many issues that the Auditor General has been asked to study, and there is an urgency to confronting this issue now. So what we would support is passing this motion, as well as passing a separate motion, and so I think in terms of the idea of a separate motion that asks the Auditor General to do that investigation, I think that would be a separate motion. We would vote in favor of that motion. But what we're asking today is for this committee to conduct a study on an urgent basis in a timeline that will allow the public to have some degree of satisfaction in terms of what's going on. That's why we think it's important to adopt this motion as well as to consider a separate motion.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. Mr. Fragaskatos.
We adjourn debate on Mr. Genis's motion.
Or could you call that, please?
Mr. Genis.
No.
Mr. Cram.
No.
Mr. McCauley.
No, thank you.
Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés.
Ça clignote, excusez. Non.
Monsieur Desjarlais.
Yes.
Ms. Bradford.
Yes.
Fragaskatos.
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 4.
Very good. Thank you. That is put aside for now. I'm sure members will come back. Mr. Jones, I'm going to move on to another issue. This is done for now. You're welcome to bring it forward to another committee. I do want to raise the issue, and again, I apologize to the witnesses. I do just want to bring committee members up to speed on the COVID-19 contracts. The committee received, this is a matter of business that is before us. The committee received from Public Services and Procurement Canada 2 of the 7 contracts on Thursday, April 13th, 2023. That was from Johnson & Johnson and Medicago. We have correspondence that you've all received from the Assistant Deputy Minister of Policy, Planning and Communication on behalf of Public Services and Procurement Canada to the committee on Thursday, April 13th. This correspondence was distributed to members on Friday, April the 14th. I won't summarize. Actually, I will. The summary is on behalf of Public Service and Procurement Canada regarding the committee's March 23rd motion to request access to contracts entered into between the Government of Canada and manufacturers of COVID-19 vaccines. based on the measures taken by the committee through its motion to limit public disclosure and safeguard the confidentiality of the information, PSPC, following consultation completed with 2 companies, is providing the first tranche. I'm just summarizing the letter. The letter also referenced the fact that we had taken steps to keep these documents confident, and that the department would, hopefully, there's no assurances, would endeavor to deliver the remainder of the contracts this week, a second and final tranche of documents in response to the motion. I, as chairman, sent correspondence back to PSPC requesting the documents without further delay. That was done on Friday, April 14th. And so now this, I want to just raise this. We will not deal with any vote on this because that will require a motion, but I wanted just to kind of get a sense of the room on this issue. I'm going to turn first to Madame St-Clair Desgagnés as the motion sponsor to address this question. I'll then turn to others if they have comments, and we can pick this up, as I'm sure a motion will be coming on for Thursday. But Madame St-Clair Desgagnés, you have the floor, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think it's a very important issue. The collaboration world in PSPC relating to a motion that was unanimously adopted, this is outrageous. This is scandalous that 15 days are provided to provide documents. The department is just next door, and after all those days, we've received only 2 of those contracts. This is not normal. We are in a democracy, and the government should show an example. So I'm asking members opposite to please talk to the department for the motion on which they voted to make sure that the Public Accounts Committee is respected. They have to ensure that we're able to do our work, and if we have to fight for upcoming generations, transparency is important. So we have to fight till the end to obtain those contracts. So I'm calling on all my colleagues here to put pressure so that we obtain those contracts. They are already late. Normally, points are removed. All teachers know that when people submit documents late. So we would like to have a serene debate. So collaboration is already a problem, but we want to make sure that these contracts finally get to us, and that next week, as planned, we can look into the contracts. So we have to tell PSPC to provide those contracts as the Public Accounts Committee unanimously decided. Mr. Janice. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally agree with my colleague.
This committee has been seeking the vaccine contracts in an unredacted form so that we can understand what was in those contracts, what kinds of deals were made between the government and vaccine manufacturers. The government didn't want those contracts brought forward. We agreed to hear from vaccine manufacturers. We tried to get an explanation from them about what exactly they wanted to hide from members of Parliament in these contracts. They did not provide any credible explanation for what they wanted to hide. And in the wake of that testimony, the committee agreed unanimously to a motion ordering the production of those unredacted documents within a certain timeline. We provided a reasonable timeline to provide those documents, but clearly the government knew this was coming. They had a lot of time to prep to hand over these documents. These are documents that they have. They provided them in redacted form, but we need them in unredacted form, and we're still waiting. Again, it begs the question, what is in these vaccine contracts that the government is so desperate to hide from 10 members of Parliament who will look at these contracts in camera? The committee unanimously ordered the production of these documents. It's outrageous that the government is continuing to try to bury them. We need these contracts forthwith, and I think the committee should prepare the necessary steps so that we can move forward on Thursday with this, and I hope there's a consensus to do that.
Thank you. Well, we don't need a consensus today. Ms. Yip, you have the floor.
The department is working as hard as they can to get these letters. And the letter also says that the documents will be coming this week.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. Very good. So look, I'm going to, sorry, Mr. McCauley, you had a comment. I'd ask you to keep it brief, but go
I'll
ahead.
be very brief. We're going through this exact same issue in the Operations Committee, a very direct committee motion that the government has repeatedly ignored despite escalating requests. This is a pattern now with this government, and I think we need to figuratively put our foot down and assert the supremacy of Parliament, not the supremacy of bureaucrats over this committee in the Parliament. Thank you.
Happy to hear from members, or I could end it now if you like. So, but Ms. Yip, if you'd like to make a comment, but
I'd also like to point out that 2 of those days were statutory holidays.
Mr. Desjardins? Mr. McCauley, order, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do believe that the timeliness of this production of this document isn't a really important piece to how this committee does function. And this isn't to cast any kind of shame against the government or the bureaucrats who are in charge of this, but it is a concern that I think should be followed up with. And I think that at the very least, this committee should note its displeasure by letter, at least, Mr. Chair, if you'd be so willing to find a way to express our displeasure with this fact, because it is delaying our work. And if it's a matter of timing and it's a matter of an innocent mistake, or if it's a matter of just not having enough time, that's okay too. But we do expect a response, and I think that it's only appropriate that this committee have a response in writing from those responsible to understand why this delay exists, so that we can't, so we don't just cast judgment as to why we think it is not present with us today. I think a response by the department is in order for this, because as Mr. McCauley mentioned, it is becoming a pattern in other committees as well, and it is concerned to the duties and operations of Parliament.
Très bien, merci beaucoup, Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sinclair. To respond to Ms. Yip, maybe there were 2 holidays, but it was the 7th of April. Today is the 17th of April. So you can do the math. You'll see that they're very late. Normally, 2 weeks to submit documents. Well, ask your admin assistants. I think 2 weeks, it's a long deadline. So they are very late, and they know very well what they are doing. Is it a new attempt to prevent us from doing our work? We will see. If they submit all documents correctly this week, we'll not talk about it anymore. But if, unfortunately, there are further delays and next week we can't study the documents as planned, I think there are going to be serious problems. Thank you.
We'll end it if you want to let me, or I'll turn it over to you.
I'm very short,
Okay.
as you know. Your comments, Ms. Sinclair Desjardins, are noted. And as the letter mentioned, the documents are coming this week. So I believe you said until the end of this week, we will see, and then we can progress from there. But I think that sending a letter or more inquiries is not warranted at this point, because the letter did say the documents will be coming this week.
So let me,
Thank you.
and I agree with much of what Ms. Yip said. In fact, Mr. Desjardins, I did send a letter Friday reminding the department that the committee takes its motion very seriously and urging it to get the documents in this week. And I'm just going to remind you all.
Just on that point, Chair.
As a courtesy, yes, but brief, please.
No, thank you, Chair, for your mercy here. But I do just want
Not
to
at
make
that
a quick
level yet.
mention. I do want to thank you for that letter. I do think, however, if we don't see the production of those documents by the end of this week, we should make very certain that we could inform them that we'll have this heard in the House.
You're getting, okay, so that you're all kind of jumping to where I was going to go. I was going to say, so I'm going to leave it on this note. This committee is welcome to take this up this Thursday or week Monday. I will let members decide that amongst themselves. I am your servant. There will be 3 options for this committee to consider, either this Thursday or Monday. It is to accept the government's reasoning is the first possibility. Number 2, it is to try to seek an acceptable compromise, although I won't speak for what I think members, but it is to find a compromise. Or the third, is to reject the reasons the department gives if it does not produce the document, and then consider turning it over to the House of Commons. So those are the avenues that we'll have, and I think we should take them up at a different time. Mr. Genuis, I would really like to hear from the witnesses. So, if you, as a courtesy, very short, but I'm not going to allow a speech on this because the
No. I'll be short. I just want to clarify, maybe with the clerk. Like, my understanding is that there's a time required for the preparation of that report to the House. So I think we should have that report ready to go, so that if we decide,
I will work on that, and if there's I will work on that behind the scenes. But I'm going to be looking for you all for the timing. I'm hearing Thursday. I'm hearing Monday. So I'm going to be coming back to you, and I'd like to know what that is because I don't want to disrupt witnesses coming in Thursday. If I can give them notice, I will. But if we can proceed with committee business, I will. So I'm going to endeavor to juggle all these balls by working with you. But if necessary, we'll be ready to move. But committee members might decide to wait till Monday.
Okay,
I'm getting conflicting signals here.
Thank you. And Chair, I did want to also provide a notice of motion on the other matter, that the committee report to the House that it calls on the Auditor General to conduct a fulsome audit of the Trudeau Foundation with a specific focus on foreign interference. So I'm providing that as a notice of motion. I think that reflected our conversation, but of course we can wordsmith that later on, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was exasperation, wasn't it? All right, there we are. Ms. Hogan, welcome back. You have the floor for 5 minutes. I want to express my gratitude to all the witnesses. Welcome to the workings of Parliament. Over to you, Ms. Hogan. Nice to see you again, Auditor.
Merci, le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss our report on accessible transportation for persons with disabilities, which was tabled in the House of Commons on the 27th of March. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Joining me today are Mylène Devnac, the principal, who was responsible for the audit, and Susie Fortier, the director who led the audit team. This audit looked at whether Via Rail, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, and the Canadian Transportation Agency worked to identify, remove, and prevent barriers for travelers with disabilities. In 2019 and 2020, more than 1 million persons with disabilities who traveled on a federally regulated mode of transportation faced a barrier. We found that all three organizations had identified some barriers and taken steps to improve accessibility. Via Rail held consultations with persons with disabilities while designing its new fleet. The company also consulted on its accessibility plan and training programs, as did the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. However, improvements were still needed in many important areas. For example, online information was not fully accessible. According to Statistics Canada, this is one of the barriers most frequently experienced by travelers with disabilities. Poor accessibility means that information is difficult to find or is incorrect for someone using a screen reader. This means it is difficult for persons with disabilities to plan or to book a trip by themselves.
And management did not always complete accessibility training. This can affect the service provided to travelers with disabilities and their companions. As the organization responsible for enforcing accessibility regulations in the transportation industry, the Canadian Transportation Agency identified accessibility barriers through its inspections, and it worked with transportation service providers to remove some. However, we found that the agency conducted few inspections, and it could only request complaint data from service providers in certain circumstances. Consistent access to this data would help the agency improve its oversight. Meanwhile, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority and Via Rail focused on resolving individual complaints, and they missed opportunities to use complaint data to better understand travelers' lived experiences. Every person has a right to participate fully and equally in society. If access to these rights is delayed or denied, the impact is that some members of society are excluded or left behind. To further improve the accessibility of trains, planes, and other federally regulated modes of transportation, responsible organizations need to broaden their consultation with persons with disabilities, make their online content fully accessible, and use complaint data to identify, learn about, and prevent barriers. This work is necessary to achieve the federal government's goal of a barrier-free Canada by 2040. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. Turning now to the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. Ms. Simon, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Nada Siman, as the Chair mentioned, and I am actually honored to be appearing for this committee for the first time as the new President and CEO of CATSA. I'm joined today by my two colleagues, Rhoda Boyd, who's the General Manager of Communications, and Louise Albarelli, General Manager of Operations Programs. As you are aware, the Canadian Air Transportation Security Authority is responsible for securing specific elements of the air transportation system. We have 4 mandated activities: pre-board screening, hold baggage screening, non-passenger screening, and restricted area identity card. We deliver the mandate of security screening at 89 designated airports across the country through a third-party screening contractor model. Our goal is to provide professional, effective, and consistent security screening across the country, combined with a focus on service excellence. And I can assure you that the accessibility is a key priority in achieving that goal. We are pleased that the OAG audit acknowledged the efforts we have already made to identify, remove, and prevent transportation barriers for persons with disabilities. L'ACSTA est fier des travaux accomplis à ce chapitre.
CATSA is proud of the work that has been done as we try to offer better experiences that are safe for people working in Canada's designated airports where they transit. Improvements are improving and remain a priority for CATSA, and it is in this light that we consider the audit an opportunity for us to consider additional measures that we could take to better respond to the needs of people that we serve.
Made as a result of the audit, which provided additional measures we can undertake to remove barriers for persons with disabilities. Specifically, the report highlighted 3 areas for improvement for CATSA. One is meeting web accessibility standards. Secondly, the timeliness of accessibility training and further consultations with persons with disabilities related to that training. And finally, developing and implementing a strategy to better analyze complaint data. In response to the first recommendation, we have taken critical steps towards ensuring our online content meets web accessibility standards. I'm pleased to announce that on March 29, 2023, CATSA did update the online content management system for its website and to a new fully accessible version. We have now turned our attention to the manual work required to update forms, visuals, and other aspects of our website, with each step contributing to an incremental improvement level of accessibility as we move forward. The second recommendation made to CATSA was with regard to the timeliness of accessibility training, and I'm pleased to confirm that all screening officers and additional management and decision makers identified to receive disability awareness training have now done so. Going forward, we have implemented a process to monitor and ensure that all screening officers receive accessibility training prior to starting work with the public, and that CATSA management and decision makers are immediately offered accessibility training upon joining the organization and complete it in a timely manner, in a set time, actually. The second recommendation on training also highlighted the importance of consulting persons with disabilities with regard to our teaching methods. CATSA has been consulting persons with disabilities since 2014 with a goal to improve screening processes operational procedures and training material for screening contractors' personnel. However, consulting on teaching methods has posed a challenge with regard to the disclosure of security-sensitive information. However, that said, while the challenge still exists, we are committed to finding an approach that meets the recommendation that were given to us, while ensuring we also respect the regulatory constraints surrounding the disclosure of this information. In response to the final recommendation on improving analysis of CATSA's complaint data, work is underway to develop and implement a strategy in consultation with various teams within CATSA, as well as with persons with disabilities. We will also ensure that the strategy aligns with the Federal Data Measurement Strategy for Accessibility of 2022 to 2027. Comme l'a noté le BVG, à l'heure...
As the Auditor General said, right now we are processing complaints individually, and that way we are able to address them in real time, and we are able to exchange with our teams and first-line operators and to offer training to consider immediate action to be taken. We agree that improvements on the ways of analyzing data could be done, and work in this regard has started. We are looking into ways of categorizing information on complaints and preparing ways of analyzing trends and reports that we could adopt to prevent our current real-time approach.
Priorities and listening and engaging with passengers, airport workers, screening officers, the CATSA workforce, and in all honesty, all who wish to work with us to identify, prevent, and eliminate accessibility barriers, both current and future. The actions we are taking today are working towards a more accessible and barrier-free tomorrow. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to present to you today, and we'll be happy to take questions after. Thank you. Merci.
And thank you very, very much. And welcome as well. When you're back, I'll say welcome back as well. We just happen to see the auditor frequently here. Turning now to the Canadian Transportation Agency, France Peugeot. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would like to thank the committee for the invitation for us to appear here today. I am accompanied by Tom Ullman, who's the General Director for Analysis and Liaison at the agency. The agency's mandate is based on the Canada Transportation Act and contributes to the National Transportation Policy, which basically strives for an accessible, competitive, economic, and efficient national transportation system that serves the needs of participants and communities and in which people trust. We have 3 major roles. We help ensure that the national transportation system runs efficiently and smoothly in the interest of all Canadians, particularly in the areas of rail and marine transportation. We provide air consumer protection for air passengers, and lastly, we protect the human rights of persons with disabilities to accessible transportation. The agency has a dual role. First of all, we are the economic regulator of the transportation industry. We make and implement regulations. We issue determinations, for example, on Canadian ownership of airlines. Furthermore, we monitor and enforce legislation and regulations. Secondly, we are an administrative tribunal. As such, we provide access to justice by resolving various disputes informally and formally through adjudication between the regulated industry and its users. Accessibility has been and continues to be a priority for us. I would like to start by acknowledging that, unfortunately, barriers do still exist for persons with disabilities in the transportation sector, and that, in spite of the progress that has been made over the past few years, there's still work to be done. After 2 years of consultation, the Accessible Transportation for Persons with Disabilities regulations came into force at different phases between 2020 and 2022. These new regulations integrated 2 previously existing regulations and 6 voluntary codes of practice and cover large transportation service providers. The agency is currently working on proposed regulations that would apply to small service providers.
Transportation Planning and Reporting Regulations, which came into force at the end of 2021. These are designed to ensure that the various members of the transportation industry plan how they intend to improve accessibility in consultation with persons with disabilities and demonstrate how this translates into concrete results. To ensure continuous communications with persons with disabilities, we have established an Accessibility Advisory Committee. This group, which meets at least twice a year, brings together members of the disability rights groups and also industry. This forum lets us get input on projects, priorities, and regulation, and provides us an opportunity to share information on our activities. The agency encourages everyone to bring forward complaints if they believe a service provider hasn't respected its accessibility-related obligations. In most cases, 97% of the time, the agency is able to help resolve those complaints through informal processes such as mediation. All accessibility complaints are prioritized, and I'm pleased to inform you that we currently have no backlog with respect to accessibility complaints. We monitor compliance with the regulations and investigate all incidents involving people with disabilities that are brought to our attention, whether it be via media, for example, or other sources. Beyond the specifics of our regulations, I believe it's also crucial for transportation service providers to instill a culture of accessibility at all levels of their organizations. And there is an opportunity currently to ensure that new and existing staff are provided quality training on accessibility and that each and every individual is imbued with a culture of respect. And I've emphasized this at all my meetings with industry executives. We're proud of the work we're doing at the agency, and we recognize that action must be taken beyond our authority to eliminate barriers in transportation. We've therefore taken a leadership role on the international stage. For example, to improve the handling of mobility aids, we have led 3 research projects in collaboration with the National Research Council and Transport Canada, and our work has been an important contribution to a recent International Air Transportation Association guidelines on mobility aids. Additionally, the agency representing Canada is chairing an ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, initiative to develop a compendium of accessibility statutes, regulation, and best practices of various countries. The compendium can be used as reference for countries looking to develop or improve their regulations and will inform ICAO direction on improving accessibility. Throughout the audit, we have collaborated fully with the Auditor General representatives, and we welcome their findings and recommendations. We're committed to implement the plan of action, which is identified in the report. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to answer questions.
Thank you very, very much. Turning now to Via Rail Canada. Marie-Claude Cardin, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to present to you the work that Via Rail is doing to provide a barrier-free travel experience for our passengers from booking to destination. We are proud of our efforts to date, as recognized by the Auditor General. And our teams will continue to carry out many initiatives in this area with dedication and professionalism. I'm accompanied today by Ms. Catherine Langlois, Senior Advisor on Universal Accessibility.
Most accessible national and intercity carrier in Canada. This is why we have undertaken several major initiatives over the past few years to create an environment where every person with a disability can travel independently and with confidence. This means that we are working every day to improve our services so that all our passengers can enjoy the same quality experience for which Via Rail is so often recognized. So today, I want to share with you the plans we have in place to remove any remaining barriers and make Via Rail a fully accessible mobility option for Canadians. Please allow me to explain some of our initiatives. D'une part, Via Rail.
First of all, Via Rail benefits from a unique expertise since the establishment of a Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee in 2021. This committee is made up of organizations representing a wide range of people with disabilities. Their advice is invaluable and helps to better determine the needs of passengers and identify the criteria for success so that Via Rail can continue to be the most accessible carrier in Canada. When Via Rail launches a new project, members of this committee are informed and, depending on the nature of the project, are invited to become involved at various levels. Via Rail recently began marketing the first train sets of our brand new fully accessible fleet of trains to serve the Quebec-Windsor corridor. I am personally proud of the inclusive approach we have taken to provide an experience that best meets the needs of people with disabilities and their companions. Some of our advisory committee members have already been invited to experience it.
Developed and launched a comprehensive accessibility training program. This training is offered to both senior management and frontline staff. To date, all members of our senior management team has completed this training with the exception of 2 new executives who began their role in April 2023. This training will be updated on a regular basis to ensure that our entire workforce has a good understanding on how our organization operates to provide a fully accessible experience for our passengers. Training material will also be reviewed in collaboration with representatives from partner organizations to address any gaps in the teaching methods used. As for the management of complaints lodged by our passengers, since last February, we have been the subject of an extended review by all of the business units concerned, which are in the best position to make the required changes. We are also committed to developing and implementing a strategy to improve the analysis of complaint data on an annual basis. Detailed quarterly reports on accessibility complaints will be produced and forwarded to our experts who will work to remedy the situation. Progress reports will then be presented to our advisory committee members. With the ultimate goal of providing a fully accessible experience at every stage of the customer journey, the accessibility of Via Rail digital assets, such as our online presence and reservation system, has also been upgraded to provide significant improvements to our passengers. C'est d'ailleurs avec enthousiasme que Via Rail
Via Rail is excited to launch a new reservation system in the near future. This new system will be a critical step in the fully accessible experience that we are committed to providing our passengers. At the same time, we are modernizing other important information systems, including the content of our web pages. We are committed to ensuring that our content meets accessibility standards in this area. And to that end, we will have our digital assets evaluated by an accessibility specialist and will implement all recommendations from that annual review. I am confident that the measures presented today will address the issues raised by the Auditor General so that Via Rail can better understand and meet the needs of its passengers. In closing, I would like to reiterate Via Rail's commitment to being the most accessible carrier in Canada. We are proud of the work we have done, and we are committed to continuing our work with the government and all our partners to create a barrier-free society. We will be pleased to answer your questions, and thank you very much. Now, we have our members who will have 6 minutes each.
Thanks, Chair. Witnesses, thanks very much. A.G. Hogan, thank you for your patience as we get through other business. A.G. Hogan, I just want to start with you for a couple questions. When you talk about the online not fully accessible, could you walk me through what exactly you mean by that? Is it mostly around visually impaired, or is there an online standard that perhaps other companies are doing that we should follow to make it so we can fix this right away?
So there are accessibility requirements and regulations that came out issued by Canada. So it was to that we held the two organizations to. So we looked at VIA's website as well as the Canadian Air Transportation Security's website. We found that there was a gap in not meeting the accessibility requirements in both. So about 17% of them were not met on the VIA site, and for CATSA it was about 15%. They would range from minor things to more important issues. So a couple examples I could give you were when we looked at trying to look at schedules with an e-reader, that an individual would get the wrong departure time. So that's just inaccurate information, which doesn't allow an individual with a disability to plan a trip on their own or book it by themselves. A second example would be that information was just very difficult to find. So if you were traveling with a service dog and you wanted to know what to expect as you tried to clear airport security, or where were the relief areas in train stations, it was very difficult to locate. Again, discouraging or making it very complicated for individuals with disabilities to travel.
When you talk about the training that is required or training that is needed, is there kind of an industry standard that perhaps these departments should be following, or are the departments kind of creating it as they go?
So again, there's regulations about the content of what should be in the training, but some of the decisions around the content should also be determined when consultation with individuals with disabilities. So when we reviewed the content against the list of mandatory elements, we did find a few gaps. But more importantly, we noted that there was a gap in the consultation about some of the teaching methods that should be there. I think the important thing to note is that the individuals who actually are the on-the-ground service had really good compliance at both organizations around training, and it was more in the management level where they were late or hadn't taken it at all. And having management complete that training is just as important because they set how policies and regulations are implemented, whether they should be adjusted and supervised, and the supervision of employees. So it's critical that everyone completed, and I believe that both organizations made that commitment, and we heard in opening remarks that some of that training's happened already.
And just two last questions. Are you satisfied with the training that is available? Like you did audit the training. Are you satisfied with it, or do they have to go back to square one and relaunch their training, or is it just a matter they haven't rolled it out to enough people?
So we didn't look at all the teaching methods. We did look at whether it met the minimum requirements of what areas to cover. Other than the small gaps that we found, we are satisfied that it met the requirements. But then it's up to individuals taking the training and then applying it, and that's where supervisors come into play. We also think that the Canadian Transportation Agency could inspect actual delivery of services, which would show whether or not the training was fruitful.
On accountability. Wait, it's too much. And last question, overall in the study, is it more infrastructure issues, or is it more follow-up on the training issues that we should focus on, or is it a smattering of both and providing proper access to all Canadians?
Well, I would say it's many things. There is about old fleets don't necessarily have to meet the current or new accessibility requirements, but the new fleets do. So it's a continuous process, and many of the services are on-demand service. So if an individual arrives in a wheelchair, the people working that day need to know how to support that individual to either gain access to a train or so on. So there's a lot of training requirements that are about the facility, about individuals, about websites. So I think it's really across the gamut if we really want transportation to be barrier-free in the country.
Thank you. Ms. Cardin, you mentioned that all senior management, except for a couple now, have gone through the training. What is your plan to stop backsliding? It would appear to me, cynically, that the training's caught up only because of the AG report. Like, what is CRBA doing to ensure that this is actually done as part of a regular process and not only when the Auditor General catches you?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. Since the Auditor General's work, we have started a very tight supervisory process. The executive and the employees are taking the training, and this process was not necessarily there before.
Okay.
And that's really your time, Mr. McCauley.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Turning now to Mr. Sidhu, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for taking the time to join us here on this rainy Monday morning here in Ottawa. Quick question for the Canadian Transportation Agency. Reading the news, we often see reports about wheelchairs or other mobility devices being damaged by airlines when they're in transit. I wanted to know kind of what are the obligations of airlines when it comes to preventing this type of damage or providing composition when it does occur, and how is this enforced?
Good morning. Essentially, what the obligation is for the providers of transportation services to ensure that the mobility aids do not get damaged. And if they do, is then to compensate, and making sure that whatever costs are incurred are being reimbursed to the person who is the user of the mobility aids. So this is essentially what the regulation says. What we do, first of all, we encourage people to do complaints to us. But also when we hear about issues, whether it be through the media or when somebody brings situations to our attention, we immediately send one of our staff to investigate the incident and make sure that the regulation has been followed. And some of the obligation are with respect to the training that the people that are handling the mobility aids must follow.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Chair, through you, another question for the Canadian Transportation Agency. The Minister of Transport recently announced additional funding to the Canadian Transportation Agency to increase its complaint processing and regulatory enforcement capacity. The question is, are some of these funds going to be allocated towards improving monitoring and enforcement activities relating to accessible transportation?
Yes. So the vast majority of the funding is for air passenger protection complaints, because this is where we have a very important backlog, as I'm sure all members of the committee know. But with respect to enforcement, some of the resources will be dedicated to increase our enforcement capacity for accessibility.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to Via Rail Canada. I wanted to know more about fleet transition to enable better access to the needs of Canadians with disability. Is the fleet evolving? If you can shed a little more light on that.
Yes, indeed. As I stated during my opening remarks, we are implementing our new fleet that covers Quebec and Windsor. This fleet will be totally accessible with more spacious washrooms, braille on the seats, braille inscriptions. All has been implemented thanks to consultations with persons with disabilities. And this is what covers our new equipment. In the new fleet, people with mobility issues could take the train to other parts of Canada. Our crew members have been trained to make sure that people can access our trains and move around reasonably while using our current equipment.
Thank you for that. And in terms of fleets and consultation, you had mentioned that there's some consultation going on. Are we looking at other countries to see what they're doing? Are we looking at other companies around the world that are seen as leaders in terms of fleet management, making sure that those with disabilities can access their services?
That's a very good question. I'll ask Ms. Langlois to give you that information.
Question, if it's okay, I'm going to answer in French.
VIARAL is part of the International Union of Railways, and without that organization, there's a special committee on accessibility. We participate with all our industry partners. You also have Amtrak in the US and other European partners, and we exchange accessibility best practices, particularly on ways of consulting persons with disabilities to improve our services.
thank you for that answer. It's very inspiring to know that we are looking at other companies and learning from countries around the world in terms of giving better access to those with disabilities. Mr. Chair, I don't have any further questions. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Et maintenant, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Small, quick comment. You don't need permission to speak in French. People don't ask for permission to speak in English, so it's a pleasure when you answer in French. Exactly. Thank you to all witnesses for coming here. We are happy to consider a very important topic. Of course, when we look at the situation of persons with disabilities, a very important topic, it's important that we consider inclusivity in a general way. We're talking about serving people in their own language, serving people who need different accessibility needs. It's not easy even for families who are going around with kids. Sometimes people are not even reimbursed. So I think that all these issues have to be addressed. During your opening remarks, Ms. Pijot, amongst other things, you talked about competitiveness in the transportation sector. A very simple question. Do you feel that we have real competitiveness issues in our air transport sector? I think that question is not for me. I was talking about the national transportation policy that guides all our activities and our mandate. It's also, I think, your role to be able to respond. We are an economic regulatory agency. For example, in the railway sector, there are two major railway providers. In air transportation, there are others. So when we look at consumer protection, in the case of the railways, we are there to make sure there are mechanisms to resolve disputes between railway users. An organization like ours is there essentially to create a balance in the market. You have service providers and the users, be they consumers, be they railway users, and of course the government is there to make sure that the market is working as smoothly as possible. And you feel that the market is efficient at this time? I'm sorry, madam, it's not for me to answer that question. What we try to do is to make sure that things are working as efficiently as possible given the context of laws that we are there to administer. Very well. If Air Canada, for example, received more than $6 billion from public funds over the past few years, who has the necessary authority to make sure that consumers are protected in Canada? You have regulations on air passenger protection, which falls under our control. At the heart of that regime, you have complaints. We all acknowledge that we have a serious backlog of complaints, and that is why we received funding recently. We are also looking into ways of dealing with those complaints to improve our efficiency. We are already obtaining results. So, of course, that is an important aspect. So that's at the heart of our consumer protection regime. Do you think that you have enough authority and enough resources, not just financial resources, but I'm talking about authority to impose sanctions to make sure that the regulations are respected by air transport carriers? What I can say is actually what I told your colleagues in the Transport Committee. The act that currently protects air passengers is rather complex. It's based on 3 categories of flights. And people that have that information to determine the categories are the air carriers. So it's very difficult for passengers and even for us to be able to determine what conditions apply. We have an act that is clearer and that is less complex will help us. I know that the ministry has made some remarks to that effect recently. In your opinion, who should be responsible for ensuring that, for example, when there's a clear mandate from the government, for example, that air staff should be able to provide services in both official languages? In your opinion, who should have the authority to make sure that those regulations are implemented and that consequences or sanctions are imposed on those who violate those regulations? Our mandate doesn't cover. Okay, if you are not the one who is responsible, who? Who then? I don't know if that mandate falls under the Official Languages Commissioner. For French, yes, but now for issues like disabilities, everything that has to do with inclusion, who is there to make sure that services are provided by air transport carriers? For accessibility issues, that's our mandate, and we are doing the best we can. So you are saying that things are shared amongst various institutions. For French, is the Official Languages Commissioner. For accessibility, it's something that falls under your mandate. We are a regulatory agency and an administrative tribunal. So we have some technical knowledge in the transport sector, and that is why we have a mandate for accessibility in the transport sector. Now, it's true that accessibility throughout the country is handled by various organizations, but when it comes to accessibility in the transport sector, we are the ones who are responsible for that. What about air passenger protection? That is under our mandate as well. We carry out our mandate depending on the existing law. So out of respect for the Parliament, if Parliament changes legislation or decides to do so, at that time, we will comply and will adopt new regulations or adjust our actions accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank as well the witnesses for being present with us this morning. And again, apologies for some of the business we have to deal with in this committee often, and for your patience in ensuring that we're able to get through some of the important business while also being able to do and conduct a review of the audit that's been presented by the Auditor General. I am, of course, often displeased when I see the reports from the Auditor General. Most of them, of course, do highlight the deficiencies that are found within our civil service and within the programs and services that are offered by the government or paid for in part by them. It's no secret that individuals, persons with disabilities, not only have significant barriers in our society writ large, but particularly in a country like Canada, one of the largest in the world, a country where our charter and our constitution protects their mobility, but the institutions that are responsible for delivering that do not. And so that is a concern, I think, to myself, and I'd hope parliamentarians from all benches to find ways and means to actually ensure that we fix this problem and ensure that transport services like Via Rail can actually accommodate persons with disabilities in a way that actually centers them and their experience. And so I understand that the departments have, in fact, worked closely in some part in consultation phases with the community to find better ways of finding points of accessibility that make those barriers less significant. But it's clear from this audit that they persist. And I want to find a better way to understand why they're continuing to persist. You know, it's noted in the audit, for example, and I quote, in 2019 and 2023, nearly 2/3 of the 2.2 million persons with disabilities who traveled on planes, trains, and other federally regulated modes of transportation faced a barrier. They're not happy to hear necessarily that huge population, huge amount of Canadians were unable to access the beauties of this great country, whether it was to see their family or services elsewhere. Another quote, while Via Rail and the Canada Air Transport Security Authority as transport service providers consulted with persons with disabilities to gather feedback on projects such as accessibility plans and the design of the Via Rail's new fleet. some ongoing issues that persons with disabilities regularly face remained. Continues that, for example, websites for planning and booking trips were not fully accessible, despite this being one of the most frequently experienced barriers in transportation for persons with disabilities. So what this tells me is, one, that the Auditor General found that you were able to identify the issue yourselves, whether it was by consultation with persons with disabilities or by other means. The community offered themselves in the consultation to have that barrier identified, and then finally that barrier persisted. I hope you can understand how unsatisfactory that is, not only to myself, but to the millions of Canadians with disabilities who have to rely on these services. It's a massive issue. So I want to start now to my questions to the Via Rail representative, who I believe is maybe online. But what are the remaining challenges that disabled Canadians face in terms of Via's online presence and reservation system?
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. I'll give the floor to Ms. Catherine Langlois to explain the plan that has been developed and that we are implementing, and that we will be implementing throughout this year. Thank you for your question. There were two parts, the internet side and the reservation system. For the internet side, we have recruited an accessibility expert to check the website once a year to see if there are parts of the website that are not accessible and to make necessary amendments or modifications. We did consultations, and we are going to have people test the website. And when they do so, they are able to test various accessibility things. So there'll be two different types of experts testing our website. Talking about the reservation system, we have a new system that will be implemented in the coming days. And this would allow people with disabilities to do their reservations on their own.
Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to follow up just specifically on some of the responses you gave. So in relation to the Via Rail's online portal, is there a target date for when that will be fully accessible for persons with disabilities? And if so, do you have an adequate resources to actually ensure that the online presence and reservation system are made and kept fully accessible as progressive updates occur?
Je vous remercie pour votre question. Donc, pour ce qui est de...
Thank you for your question. As for the date of completion, our target is the end of 2023 because it's very exhaustive work that we are doing. So that website should be completely accessible by the end of the year. As for the reservation system, we think we'll have adequate resources to make it 100% accessible.
Process. You mentioned the end of 2023. Are persons with disabilities being consulted throughout this process, and will they be consulted for the product that is inevitably created by that target date?
Je vous remercie pour votre question. En effet, les membres de notre...
Thank you for your question. Members of our advisory committee who represent people with different types of disabilities will be consulted throughout the process to make sure that the modifications we are making on our website correspond with best practices when it comes to web accessibility.
I'll allow one last question. Go ahead.
Just to describe the composition of this council and how the council is appointed, reviewed, or when or if new members are ever added.
Donc, les membres du...
Members of the advisory committee at Via Rail, or rather, the composition is based on that by the Canadian Transportation Agency. So we asked those same people if they wanted to participate, and most of them accepted. So these are people from different groups, various advocacy groups throughout Canada representing people with various types of disabilities, and they meet once every 3 months.
Much. Turning to our beginning our second round, Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here today, and I would also like to thank you for all of your work on this issue. I think that all parties and all members can agree that creating a more inclusive transportation system and a more inclusive society for persons with disabilities is certainly very important, and certainly, according to the audit, progress has been made, but there's always more work to be done. With that, I guess I'd like to start with the witnesses from Via Rail. On page 14, it spells out the accessibility training for managers and executives as well as client service staff. So I was wondering if the witnesses from Via could clarify, is accessibility training mandatory for both managers and executives as well as client service staff?
Yes, it is mandatory.
So then how is it that, well, I guess two things. 17% of managers and executives did not take the accessibility training at all, according to the audit, as well as 3% of client service staff. How is it possible that so many people got missed, given that it's mandatory?
It is an unacceptable situation, and that's why we've put in place a stringent follow-up going forward to ensure that we don't have this situation anymore.
But could you explain how it got missed in the first place, though? Did someone just miss an email here and there, or was there a lack of communication or understanding in understanding that it was mandatory? Could you just shed some light on how it came about in the first place?
I think it was well known that it was a mandatory training. As I said, it was unacceptable, and these trainings should have been completed.
Okay. For the 17% of managers and executives who did not complete the training, did any of them receive bonuses for the time period that they did not get the training?
En fait, le plan de compensation est composé de deux éléments majeurs, la contribution personnelle et puis les résultats de la société. Le plan de compensation a été mis en place premièrement parce qu'on est dans un environnement.
Initially, because we are in a competitive environment where we are looking for talent. So people have attained some objectives. So those who met some objectives received the compensation that they were entitled to.
And so if I understand you correctly, it is possible that some managers and executives could have received their bonuses even though they did not complete the accessibility training. Is that correct?
En fait, je vais revenir sur le fait.
I was saying that accessibility is important, just like many other regulations that Via Rail executives must respect. So as I said, so there's specific follow-up. The compensation for executives has a fixed portion, and then there's a variable portion as well. So we want to make sure that the compensation remains competitive in the market in which we function.
Okay, I was wondering if you could provide a written response then for the committee, the total number of managers and executives who received bonuses who did not complete the accessibility training. Okay. Okay, thank you. I guess I'll switch gears now to let's see here. To the witnesses from the Canadian Transportation Agency. On 16 of the report, it says that inspections to identify accessibility barriers were done virtually during the pandemic, and then they continued a mix of virtual and on-site inspections after the pandemic was over. And so for these virtual inspections, was it simply a Zoom meeting, or how does one, I'd be curious to know how one does a thorough inspection virtually?
So maybe what I can share with you is how we approached the compliance with respect to that new regulation. So when the regulation came into force, what we did is we wrote to the 40 main transportation service providers and we basically sent all the regulatory requirements that they had, and we asked them for a written report as to how they intended to meet those regulations. So we received the report, and then we looked at what they answered vis-a-vis what were the requirements, and then we identified areas where there were some issues, and we asked them for a corrective action plan, which is a traditional way of ensuring compliance with the new regulation that regulatory agencies take. After that, what has happened is the enforcement officers went and did some on-site visit and checked certain aspects of those corrective action plans. And in some cases, they went to terminals. In some cases, for example, signage was still a problem, and we issued some administrative monetary penalties.
And thank you very much, Mr. Cram. That is your time. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all the witnesses that are here today and those online, and for your patience. This is a very, very important report, obviously. People with disabilities rely even more on our public transportation means because they don't have the luxury, because of their disabilities often, of providing their own transportation. So we need to make sure that it is accessible. So I think I'm going to turn my first questions to the Canadian Transportation Agency. The Auditor General has identified that you identified accessibility barriers through inspections, and it worked with transportation service providers to remove some. So you just explained to MP Cram that the vast majority of these were done virtually. As you described it, it seems almost more like a survey. You send out questions, they answer. I think it's a bit difficult to see how things are actually working on the ground. What are the advantages and disadvantages of virtual? I know it's probably more efficient, you can cover more, but I'm not sure how effective they might be.
Well, the way we look at trying to identify the barriers, so for sure on-site inspection and the work we've done with the new regulation, which was to start by asking from companies how they intended to meet the regulations, is one way. But we have different other ways as well to identify the barriers. So we have, for example, an advisory committee comprised of groups representative of people with disabilities, and that's a forum through which they can share with us the barrier that they encounter. We also have complaints. We receive, about, it depends on the years, but I would say 170 more or less per year. And the complaints that we receive is, again, another important source of information for us as to what kind of barriers people with disability encounter. And then, of course, we have inspection. So it's true, I would say, a mix of those tools that we can identify a barrier and then focus our activities. I should point out that there's also a new regulation that has to do with planning and reporting, where all the service providers of transportation are going to be asked to do, have been asked to prepare an accessibility plan in consultation with people with disabilities. Those plans are going to be put, online. People will be able to comment. They will have to review them every 3 years. So we're going to be using as well those plans to help inform ourselves of how the industry is going to advance on the issue of accessibility.
Of course, you'll have to make sure that the online process is accessible, because that's been another issue, right?
For sure.
Exactly.
That's a very important point.
So also, the Auditor General found that you did conduct few inspections, but you could only request complaint data from service providers in certain circumstances. That's troubling to me. Why is that, and what are the certain circumstances that, like if you're supposed to be overseeing this, why don't you have access to the data all the time and just...
Well, the type of data that the Auditor General was referring to is the complaints that the companies receive themselves. Because, of course, we receive certain amount of complaints, we do some inspections, and in that context, we can have access to the information we need to do our work. The type of data that we don't have access on is all the various complaints that companies would receive on accessibility. and which would give us, a better sense, that's for sure, of the barriers that the people with disability identify and raise issues with the company. So that's something that we will for sure go to the to the transportation providers and ask if they would share with us on a voluntary basis that information. We know that in some cases they already do with other countries, so we are going to, of course, look at that as well, and maybe eventually we will have similar legislation here.
I just wonder why it should be voluntary. So, Ms. Hogan, you've mentioned also that the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority and Via Rail focused on resolving individual complaints, but that they missed opportunities to use complaint data to better understand the traveler's lived experience. Would you like to expand on that so it looks like there's not it looks like that process could be better. They're not getting the overall, they're dealing with the individual, but
Absolutely. I encourage you to ask as well the representatives from the two organizations. It's great to have them here instead of always hearing from me. When we looked at the two, if I look at VIA, I would tell you that what we saw is that while they handled individual complaints, they didn't sort of take that step back to do a more thorough analysis of all their data to look for trends or bigger picture things that might indicate a barrier that they're not aware of, which is focusing on meeting individual complaints. When it came to CATSA, we looked to the way they categorized their complaints, and they categorized them by nature and not necessarily by the status of a person. And so we analyzed some of the data and felt that there was an opportunity there to do a better, mining of their complaint data, because while they had only registered about 83 complaints related to individuals' disabilities, when we did a word search linked to disabilities, we found almost 1,000. While I recognize that not all of them will be linked to this, it just shows you that there's an opportunity there to better understand and dig into the data to identify barriers and opportunities for improvement.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that.
That is your time, Ms. Bradford. Unless you have a short question?
Yes, it actually
Please
is
do.
short.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So getting back to Ms. Pajot, in an earlier answer, you referred to 3 categories of flights. Can you just elaborate? What are the 3 categories of flights?
Yeah, this is in the context of air passenger protection. It's not in the context of accessibility, right? So you have, when an incident happens, and it could be within the control of the airline, it could be within the control of the airline but required for safety, or it could be outside the control of the airline. So, for example, outside the control would be a snowstorm, right?
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, vous avez la parole.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you heard, Ms. Pajot, I only have 2.5 minutes, so I'll ask you a broad question, but try to go to the main issue. You mentioned that you are limited by the current regulation. If you had recommendations to make to change that law in order to provide quality service to Quebecers and Canadians, and also a more competitive system, what will you be recommending? Your colleague also told me to talk about the 3 categories. One of the categories that could be confusing is the first. It's under the air carriers, but has to do with safety. And that's why we had to go through court decisions sometimes to clarify that issue. So if the act were clearer when it comes to what is the responsibility of the carriers and what are extraordinary circumstances and what requires compensation. That's just an example. Those are issues that need to be clarified in the current legislation because it's a legislative matter that is the responsibility of Parliament. Good. I'll also like to ask you a question. When it comes to staff, I think you have 4 full-time employees who are responsible for looking at the matter in Canada for the transport accessibility file. Do you think that's enough? We are doing the best we can given the current resources we have. We recently received some huge funds, which should help us improve all our capacities for implementing the law, including accessibility. So you are considering recruiting other people, because there was also another matter. Maybe the agency is not aware of all cases because some are only sent to the carriers. So maybe you don't identify all cases, and maybe you'll be able to address all accessibility issues. It's different because for cases that are submitted directly to the air carriers, it's that we do not have the necessary authority to request that data. I still do not have the authority. So should the law change so that you have the authority to request that information? Yeah, that's something that could be considered. But we are going to have the capacity to implement the act, more resources, considering the funds we've just received. So there are two major changes. So I'm looking at the analyst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to just follow up now with the Auditor General in regards to the end of my last comments to the Via Rail representative. They mentioned that they had a body, that this body was a consultant body, that it was monitoring the work that they were doing to implement many of the objectives of Via Rail, including the work related to online reservations and booking and accessibility for that website. The representative also mentioned that this body was a group of people taken in some part by advice by the government. And so this is an area I think that is a really important area, is the requirements for what is a good level of consultation. What is the threshold for respectful consultation that one takes into account the lived experiences of the persons who are offering that consultation, but also ensures that when they do offering those the aspects of themselves that are important to consultation, that there's actually follow-up and respect to the kind of standards that persons with disabilities would expect from consultation. So my question is, what are the best practices? And I do understand that this might be something that is not yet developed by the Auditor General's office, but what are the best practices on how to consult inclusively, accessibly, and in a meaningful way with persons with disabilities? In your view, did the audited organizations follow the best practices, or were there shortcomings?
Well, I might see if Susie wants to add to this, since she did a lot of the detailed work. But I guess what I would tell you is that even the Accessibility Act says there should be nothing about us without us, and so obviously consultation is important. What we found when we looked at the consultations linked to VIA is that it wasn't always clear how they considered the input, and so that doesn't mean they didn't, but we just couldn't identify it. I don't know if Susie wants to add about maybe some best practices.
Yeah, so we looked at various things for identifying best practices, including the guidelines on consulting person with disability from the United Nations, as well as various other information from academia. And we also consulted with person with disability ourselves on how to consult a person with disability. You mentioned inclusivity, accessibility, and engagement. Like for inclusivity, we want to make sure that there is a broad variety of persons that are consulted, so that they cover a broad variety of disability. We want to make sure that the consultation itself is accessible, because there's various means of communication, and if the consultation is using only one mean, it can be in itself a barrier to participate in the consultation process. And we want it to be meaningful, meaning that the consultation itself the information gathered in the consultation should be decided upon in a meaningful manner.
Did the organizations, were they, in your perspective, or at least the perspective of the Auditor General's office, consistent with those objectives?
In some cases, they were. We mentioned in particular in the report the consultation for the new fleet of Via Rail, which we thought that met a lot of these good requirements. And in some, there's still always opportunity to do a broader consultation. And as noted in the report, we have some cases of some element of program on which there was no consultation. For example, the teaching method on the training for accessibility. So
no consultation. Wow.
The consultation was not done in this element for specific content.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cardin, I just want to go back to you and just to follow up on Mr. Desjardins' comments and Mr. Cram's comments a bit. How much federal subsidy does VIA get every year from taxpayers or from the government?
In the context of accessibility?
No, overall, how much in subsidies does the government deliver to VIA?
I should have the number right away, but it's I would say it's around 400 million per year.
Right, and this is what I want to get at, and again to follow up to Mr. Cram and Mr. Desolet's comments. Like, taxpayers are shoveling almost $500 million a year to VIA, and yet it takes the Auditor General's report to get VIA to act on accessibility issues. I'm curious, like, how could this have happened? And how is it acceptable that taxpayers are handing over $400 million, and yet a large part of the Canadians are excluded from proper service? And this is not like dealing with like old infrastructure that I understand, okay, perhaps at a station somewhere it's limited use and limited infrastructure, but these are some very basic things that other companies without $400 million in subsidies can get done for Canadians. How did this happen?
If I may, le programme de la nouvelle flotte.
The program for the new fleet is a 1.5 million investment, and we...
New fleet. VIA got $400 million. I'm talking about the general failure on accessibility to a large portion of Canadians. How did this happen? How does VIA come to Canada, the government every year, give us $400 million, but we're going to exclude a large amount of Canadians from proper service?
En fait, nous n'excluons pas nos...
We are not excluding people with disabilities from our contracts, from our companies. There's a plan that we are implementing. We have a new fleet. Of course, we don't want to talk about that, but for the plan...
It's 2023, and you've received over $1 billion. Well, since I've come onto this committee, you've received almost $3 billion in subsidies, and yet you haven't fulfilled your mandate to serve a certain demographic. What I'm just trying to get across is I hope you take this seriously, the disappointment of the inaction of VIA. Tons of times you've come back to the government asking for more money, and yet you failed to serve those who have accessibility issues. Getting back to Mr. Cram, I'm seeing online 650 VIA managers got bonuses last year for $6.5 million, and I realize the bonus issue is based on various issues. I hope VIA seriously looks at this and tells the managers, unless these accessibility issues are addressed, they won't be eligible for next year. When will the accessible trains that you have running, like the Windsor to Quebec corridor, when will they be rolled out to the rest of the country? I realize perhaps the prairies, we don't have the volumes, but that should not mean Canadians on the prairies don't get proper access. When will we see those rolled out?
Alors, il y a deux choses. Il y a premièrement...
There are two things. First of all, the new fleet, as you've stated, for trains that are off the corridor, our trains are accessible, but not completely accessible. I will ask Ms. Langlois to tell you the major differences. And then we have the stations that are outside the corridor. There's now a plan to put things in place, and the plan is being executed, of course, with the money that we received over the past few years. So, Catherine, could you supplement my answer?
Sorry, can I try? Would you provide us that plan or provide Cole's notes and a timeline when these issues will be addressed?
Definitively.
Thanks. Is that my time, sir?
You got about 20 seconds, but
okay.
time for a question if you like.
Just last quick question. What is the percentage of employees in management that have not completed the training? You mentioned just 2 executives. What is the overall percentage for regular employees in management that have not completed the required training?
Je pense qu'au moment où on se parle,
at this time, I think 91% of all our employees have taken the training. Of course, you still have new employees that are joining us. So when we talk about all employees, we're talking of first-line employees working on the train. So they are the ones taking the mandatory trainings. For executives, it's now at 100%.
Yep, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to welcome Ms. Seaman, as it's your first time. It's not our usual committee. Usually we try to focus on the good work that the Auditor General and her team do. And so on that note, my question is directed to Madame Pigeot and Madame Cardin. It's in regards to your opening statement about crucial for transportation service providers to instill a culture of accessibility at all levels of their organization. How do you propose to do this, especially when not everyone on the management team has completed the mandatory accessibility training on time?
Well, we have different tools to support that, right? So, of course, it starts with like the big framework is the legislative and the regulatory framework, which really serves as, I would say, as the foundation. So we have the ATPDR, the Accessible Transportation Regulation, and we have a very brand new regulation with respect to reporting and planning. So that's where we ask. That's where every transportation service providers have to provide, every 3 years, based with consultations with people with disability, and has to make this public how they intend to advance accessibility. With respect to the regulation which that we are responsible for as well, I've answered a bit to your colleague. I mean, how we have consulted with, we have asked companies how they intend to meet with the regulations. And actually, we also ask for evidence, about how they are meeting the regulations. So it was not just a survey, just to be very precise on that. So this is, I would say, a first step. Of course, in the context of our mandate, we do also compliance and enforcement activities. We also develop guides to help the various transportation service providers about how to meet with their regulation. And when I meet with, and when my colleagues meet with executives, we actually, really encourage them and insist on the fact that they should treat this as a priority. Recently, for example, the National Airlines Association, actually, the CEOs issued a statement where they recognize that they have to do better and committed to do better in the area of accessibility. So we will certainly, look at with interest how they intend to follow up on that. But the fact that they recognize that, I don't want to take full credit. That would not be fair. But I hope that the various interventions we've made in that area has supported that.
Thank you. Madame Cardin?
C'est certain que au niveau de
At Via Rail, and I said this before, accessibility is a very important issue. And I said on several occasions, the management committee made sure that everyone took the training, and we respect accessibility standards as best as we can. There's still work to be done, but for each new project that we engage in, we make sure that people with mobility issues or disability issues are appropriately consulted.
Thank you. I'd like to split the remainder of my time to Mr. Fragiskatis.
It's a quick point, Mr. Chair. I don't think I'll have enough time to engage in questioning today. Ms. Cardin, if you were here, I would have approached you after the meeting. It doesn't relate to the matters raised in the report, but it certainly does relate to VIA. On behalf of constituents, and I know that you're not primarily responsible for this at VIA, but Train 82 that services London to Toronto has been in it's been in a difficult state. It hasn't been servicing commuters from our city, and I just hope that VIA does its due diligence to restore service, because it's an ongoing issue for Londoners, particularly as they seek to travel to Toronto to carry out various activities, including work. So I leave that with you, and I wouldn't be living up to my responsibilities if I didn't take the opportunity to to put that on record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The work of MP never ends, and there's many different aspects to our job, so your comments are certainly welcome here when we do have official before us. I want to thank everyone for coming in today. I appreciate your patience with us, and I'll now adjourn the meeting. We'll see you back here, committee members, on Thursday.